What time is it?
Okay, we have some fabulous live music later on, but right now, here's the kind I prefer.
What's up, everybody? This is Shad with West Coast Styles. It is Friday, October 14th for the second segment of In the News with Douglas Century. We have the titular subject right here with us again to discuss some current events in hip hop this month. Doug, thanks so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure for me, and just to find any dudes who can have a really, really in-depth conversation about a subject that I love, hip hop. I'm happy to do this. Okay. So what's going on this week, this month? Let's just think about it. I know we talked about Coolio, Kanye. I mean, you hit me up. Like, what do you think is the biggest news in hip hop this last few weeks?
Starting things off, I think what we'd want to do to speak on it sooner than later, just because it happened, unfortunately, right after our last conversation, was the passing of Coolio.
Yeah.
A real West Coast legend that I truly think didn't, get the recognition he deserved while he was alive for what he did for the genre, especially with younger fans, because to me, he was one of the people that really made hip hop go pop, and not in a bad way. He broke down so many barriers and introduced so many people to rap, and even West Coast rap. I mean, I think there was even a little bit more of a universal appeal to him than even Dre and Snoop in some respects.
Yeah, I mean, Gangsta's Paradise. So that album, was it 95?
Yep.
And Dangerous Minds came out. You got to refresh my memory. I lived through this stuff, but it's not like, at the tip of my finger, on my fingertips. When was the Michelle Pfeiffer movie? 95 as well, or 96?
Yeah, I believe both of those were 95. Okay. Coolio already had a little bit of a presence in rap, as he was part of a group called the Mad Circle with Dub C. But as a solo artist, I didn't know about the time, going back to where I was in real time at that point in like third grade. Coolio, that Gangsta's Paradise song is actually one of the first songs that ever introduced me to rap.
Yeah. And by the way, so I'm living in New York at that point. We'd had, the Chronic, the original Chronic come out. We'd heard Snoop, but Gangsta's Paradise, I would liken it a bit to a song by Aini Kamosi, Here Comes the Hot Stepper, which was played at all the fashion shows. Suddenly with that song, Gangsta's Paradise, people that I knew, editors, writers, who didn't give a crap about hip hop, like, I love this song. Maybe it was the singing hook, maybe it was the message, because it was really like the content of what he's saying in Gangsta's Paradise is pretty dark. Yeah, but it's done in a way that's very accessible. Like, I think it was maybe 3 weeks on Billboard #1.
I don't know the exact statistics, but that wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yep.
Were you familiar when Gangsta's Paradise came out with this album before that, It Takes a Thief?
I knew of it, and now I've listened to it. But I mean, I actually knew of him through Mad Circle because Dub C. I mean, I think he left them out, but in any event, I had heard him because Dub C was down with Rhyme Syndicate, and Coolio had that sound. I would liken it a bit to MC8. A couple of guys that crossed over and really sounded like West Coast and different. Mm-hmm. And I mean, he clearly had skills. He was a really good storyteller. He'd overcome a bunch. I mean, the thing I remember very well is people saying, man, this motherfucker was a crackhead. Like, he had been a crackhead, and he beat that to have a career. So, I mean, it was almost like this guy's a survivor, right? He overcame a bunch of shit to do what he had to do, right?
And this is in hindsight, again, me not being able to contextualize any of this in 1995. But when I listen to the records now, it's like, we'll get to, touch on more of Gangsta's Paradise in a second, but even like with It Takes a Thief, there were certain songs on that album, like County
was
Line.
That Fantastic Voyage, was that on that album?
Fantastic Voyage was on that. That was the big single, the Lakeside sampled single off that. Yeah. Some of a couple of the deep cuts that really stood out to me on that. One of them in particular was a song called County Line, and he's basically talking about standing in line to receive food stamps and WIC food and so forth. And it's just like, gangster rappers weren't talking about that.
Yeah. Yep.
And so there was almost like a strength and vulnerability there. and he was kind of able, I don't want to say make light of it, but address it in a less aggressive manner that I think made it more accessible. And again, I think a lot of other gangster rappers weren't going to talk about stuff like that. Or is this kind of the song called Can of Corn, about how the hook is basically talking about how like that there were times that's all he had to eat.
It strikes me that's a bit around the time of like when ODB came out and was just like, you know, he's going to get his public assistance. He put his public assistance card on the debut record, right?
Yeah.
Like I think that was becoming a little bit more fashionable at that point in the 90s to say, dude, stop acting like you got a ton of money or you've always had a ton of money. Let's talk about the shit that's real to us, meaning being hungry. But you're right. The original rappers were trying to like portray a glamour, and even the West Coast guys, it was like my low rider, you know, all my money, you know, Ice-T set the bar with high rollers and
or even I'm your just survival of the fittest, which, you know, has its place in that environment too. But right. I feel like Coolio's music in a certain respect spoke to more people because a lot of people aren't even in those environments, aren't gangsters, aren't drug dealers.
He was really well liked. I got to say that. Like, I mean, I just know from seeing Ice-T's tweets and comments, he was like, you know, I just spoke to the brother. He was about to do a European tour, I think this summer. You know, people are back to touring. So yeah, he was really well liked, and he was I never would think of him as an influential MC the way you explained it to me, because I just remember Gangsta's Paradise and Fantastic Voyage. You were telling me like even on Nickelodeon, right? Like weren't there?
Coolio also did the theme song for Kenan and Kel. And that
you told me that as well. And I kind of remember watching that show because my daughter used to be at that point. So my daughter's 20, and it was kind of a division between Disney Channel content and Nickelodeon content. So Nickelodeon had Victorious. There were all these shows on Nickelodeon that I would sometimes tune into. But bearing in mind, I'm a dad, so I'm half listening, half not.
Yeah.
But I can recall that like Kenan and Kel was a big deal on Nickelodeon, right?
It was a really funny show. I mean, I thought Kenan Thompson and Kel Mitchell had great chemistry. But yeah, Coolio did the theme song for it. And I mean, again, anybody that grew up kind of in my age bracket, I'm 35. We all know All Here Goes. So
yeah. So that's a formative era for any young person. I mean, it's the stuff you're hearing. I didn't make the connection to Coolio for that. But yeah, I mean, props to the guy. The guy had a disproportionate, for the length of his career at the top, like he had a disproportional impact. I agree with you. Stratospheric, because that movie, when Dangerous Minds came out, that song was everywhere. And it's still, my definition of a great record is if I listen to Bob Dylan like a Rolling Stone, if I listen to the Beatles singing Hey Jude, if I listen to a 90s hip hop record and it still sounds fresh. So cool, I was just listening to Gangsta's Paradise driving home I'm a little bit late to get on the air with you, but like, fuck, I was listening to that in the car. I was like, this shit still holds up. Like, you can listen to Gangsta's Paradise and that doesn't sound like it
definitely has a timeless sound to it. And then the other thing that kept that song alive, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, is Weird Al's parody, Amish Paradise, which...
Yeah, I remember it vaguely. Yeah.
It garnered some controversy just because there was, and I don't recall the exact specifics, but I think someone, like when Coolio had won a Grammy for Gangsta's Paradise, kind of at the press junket afterwards, someone asked him what they thought of it. And then he just said he's not sure how that happened. He didn't sanction the record because typically, and props to Al for this, and he's always done this, he's gone about getting permission from the artists to parody their songs.
Yeah.
And he said, because, as you were saying too, the seriousness of the message of Gangsta's Paradise, and Coolio's like, because of that, I just couldn't sign off on it. And then I'd seen Weird Al in the press multiple times just talking about how just sincerely apologizing to Coolio and just saying, I was told by somebody at your record company that you had given it the green light. And
this is something I never heard this side of it. I did not know that.
Yeah, I believe they've since made peace. Again, granted that was 25 years ago, right? But so I think they were able to patch things up.
So there's a certain LA sound that I associate with around 95, which was not Ice-T and it was not Ice Cube. And I'm listening going, damn, these guys are talking about dangerous, violent, sad lives. Like, it really was not glorifying it. It was telling you this is how these guys are living in LA. And then the videos, of course, made a huge impact because they're, I mean, New York guys weren't wearing those braids and that whole pressed, I don't know how much starch they sell in LA to make those khakis. Everything was pressed, but it had a huge impact, even in New York City. Like, being a hip hop journalist, I'm listening to this going, damn. So, I mean, yeah, Coolio is up there. He's only 59 years old.
Yeah. And I believe this news just broke that he died of a heart attack.
Yeah, I saw heart attack. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I hope not, cocaine, crack, and all that affects your heart long term. So, God, I hope not. I mean, yeah, all I saw from the people that I am in touch with, in the music business, was that he was about to do a European tour and that everybody said he was just in good spirits. So it's another one of these.
His third album, My Soul, but that was a great album too.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to say I've been, sleeping on Coolio, but like when you told me, you sent me the track Ghetto, I'm listening to that. I'm like, I mean, that he's one of those artists that just kind of, there's many artists like this. They kind of slip between the cracks, right? They're influential, they're important. It's the same way. If I said to your audience, Brand Nubian, people might know Tribe Called Quest. There's a whole bunch of guys that were really influential in the sound of the 90s that nowadays, could they even sell at a show? I'm not sure. But I actually, when it's like they say, give people the flowers while they're still alive, I wasn't appreciating Coolio the way I should have been. Like, honestly, Gangsta's Paradise was the only thing, and Fantastic Voyage. You sending me a few songs, I'm listening to this going, man, this guy had a bunch of shit. He had his first record in 87. And the first, I think he had a falling out with Dub C or whatever. Like, he's only on the first Mad Circle. And I'm listening to this going, man, it was like Dub C, he's got his style. And then he's given it over to Coolio. And I'm listening, they have a good chemistry. That was a good group. They were a very, very solid group. If you're 35, so anybody from 35 and under, like down to 25, you're like, you got to understand, 90s hip hop was just coming at us. You had like, the Native Tongues posse, West Coast, and then you started hearing about Master P and these guys down south. I heard Scarface. I'm like, holy shit. Like, it was inundating you with differences. So you were trying to scrabble. I mean, unless you're going to spend all your waking hours, 18 hours a day, listening to different tapes and different, back in the days of cassettes, you're like, you just got to catch what you catch. Right?
The other big controversy, Kanye West.
Kanye. I mean, college dropout, graduation, still a couple of my favorite records. And on My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, that's the only article I ever wrote about Kanye, by the way, was one of his great albums, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. And I wrote about him for a magazine called Art News, because if you recall, he got a very well-known American contemporary artist named George Condo. So if you look at, I mean, people aren't that into cover art anymore, but that My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy had exclusive paintings done for them. And the artist, George Condo, told me Kanye was very involved at that point. Kanye had specified, this is what I'd like my cover to be. And this is a very well-known American artist who's painting stuff for millions of dollars. And I asked him, I said, does Kanye really, like, oh yeah, he knows his contemporary art. He knows his Warhol and his Roth. I mean, Kanye at that point was saying, I'm a genius, I'm Picasso, but like, oh God, there's Monster on that record. And then there's
I love that
all of the lights. I was going through a divorce and he was talking about public visitation, couldn't see my daughter. I mean, I don't know if that was personal to his life, but that record, and then to see what he's become with I mean, I hate to even wear a red Adidas hat because it's like Make America Great hat. Like, he's wearing the MAGA hats, he's meeting Trump, and now this latest shit, White Lives. I'm like, is it mental illness? Is it attention seeking? I'm at this point, I'm confused because the guy was so influential as a producer, and I mean, he's a great lyricist as well. I mean, my favorite stuff that he did probably was the collab with the Watch the Throne.
Yeah, the album with Jay-Z about
I
10 years
mean,
ago. Yeah.
there's so many, but like he's clearly a brilliant guy, but some of the stuff he's doing now is so destructive. It really is. It's destructive.
I mean, I don't think there's any way to justify it. I think I was listening to an interview with Dame Dash earlier today, and they were interviewing him about it. And he kind of alluded to some of what you were saying too, is just like, you know, we all kind of know he has had his struggles with mental health. So people should just be concerned or express that concern, which they have. But
Right.
but at this point, for him to still continue this rhetoric that is so explosive,
Yeah.
even if he, and if he knows, and I'm not one to speak, I'm not qualified, nor do I feel comfortable, speaking on his health issues or speculating or anything like that. But if that is the case, okay, do what you need to do. I hope you get help.
I mean, he's in Paris. So, I mean, if it was just him, like talking shit about Pete Davidson on a video, yeah. I get that. That's your ex-wife. But he goes and he makes White Lives Matter. And Candace Owens is there and they're wearing them. And, we're going to get to the Jewish subject, but the Anti-Defamation League has, B'nai B'rith has the Anti-Defamation League, which is not just concerned with anti-Jewish rhetoric. It's all hatred of all kinds. They log hate incidents, and they're like, White Lives Matter is a slogan of the neo-Nazis and the Aryan nations. So he's taken something. So I chalk that up to you're trying to get clicks, you're trying to get attention. And then I see that, messages with him and Puffy, and he's saying that, go tell the Jews that control you. And then, I mean, I'm Jewish, so, just full disclosure. And then he starts, obviously he said
about DEFCON 3.
DEFCON 3 on Jewish people. Okay, let me go off. What the fuck? I was like, dude, I think I sent you, like, when I got to New York, so in 91, there was a huge issue in hip hop of the influence of Minister Farrakhan, who has done some positive things, Million Man March, but the Nation of Islam has a history of promoting a fallacy, a canard, that Jews, honestly, my daughter, who is half Black and half Jewish, when I told her about this, she goes, don't you think Blacks and Jews like have so much in common? Yes, we do. But the Nation of Islam, due to its ties to Islam, had this vested interest in promoting the idea that of all the racist whites in the world, Jews are the worst. And we were responsible for the slave trade. I sent you. So he published a book. Nobody is credited as the author. It's called The Secret Relationship. The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews. And Ice Cube was promoting it. I think Ice Cube's just got some issue with Jerry Heller that he can't get over, because, like, honestly, Jewish people have helped Ice Cube in his career as well. I mean, he can't have done as many films as he has, without having worked with Jewish executives.
And Kanye, you said the same thing about Kanye too.
Exactly. But so back up a little bit. Jerry Heller. I don't know Jerry Heller. Never. I mean, he's, rest in peace. He's dead. He might have jerked people in their deals. Ice Cube did a bunch of records. No Vaseline. He's just saying that Jew, well, I think I sent you a link to this thing. Yeah. So Jerry Heller said, this is the publishing deal we gave these guys. And whoever researched that article said, now let's flip it. Maybe it wasn't a great deal, but let's flip it. Russell Simmons, who signed the Beastie Boys. So now you have an African-American executive. gave the Beastie Boys, 3 Jewish guys, the exact same deal. So getting jerked in the music industry or getting a shitty deal or whatever has nothing to do with the person. That a black executive like Russell Simmons might do it. It's just, well, do you have a good lawyer? I mean, Ice Cube should be asking himself, well, why didn't I go get a fucking good lawyer to... Now, I'm going to tell you, I don't think Ice-T would mind me saying this, because I asked him, there was a moment where something came up about NWA and him. And I said, because they went on tour in 88. And he goes, man, Jerry Heller wanted to manage me, but I knew that guy was a piece of shit. And I'm like, okay, well, I could see he was a piece of shit. I think he said it like that. But yet the guy that signed, so Jerry Heller, a Jewish manager, I could see he was a piece of shit trying to rip people off. But then the guy who signed Ice at Sire Records was Seymour Stein, a Jewish guy. Ice-T, being as brilliant a man as I know he is, didn't say, Jerry Heller is a piece of shit, he's a Jew, therefore all Jews. He said, this guy, this individual is a piece of shit. This other individual, Seymour Stein, is great. He signed the Talking Heads and Madonna. He's a visionary. Smart people do not generalize their bad experiences with one ethnic group, be it Chinese, Pakistan, whatever. If you have a bad experience, you don't say all of them are this way. You leave it to, I mean, that's my view of it, of humanity. You can have a bad experience with one group or one person. Take it as an individual experience. So what Kanye said, just so if people don't understand this, he once again promoted this idea that Jews are all powerful and control the media and control people. And people might say, well, how is that? Actually, people have said this to me. How's that like insulting? Because isn't that like a good thing? Like you're powerful? I'm like, no, that's what Hitler, first of all, we don't control the media. I mean, there are lots of Jewish journalists, but the idea that Jews control things and have a Zionist conspiracy and are the puppet masters, Jewish people do not, by and large, practice more racism than the general white person. There are racist Jewish people, 100%, and there are racist Chinese people. And there's race. My point about all this is that when you see a guy with as many followers as an Ice Cube or a Kanye saying these things that impressionable minds might take to heart, it's disconcerting, because you're saying, dude, do you not see the repercussions? So what the Anti-Defamation League and several other people said when he sent this out, and, it was mostly the Twitter universe.
Yeah.
Is, people responded like, boom, these kind of words do lead to violence. Maybe he's mad. Like, I actually think some of these things are personal. Like, Ice Cube must be still fucking pissed off at Jerry Heller. Maybe Kanye's just mad at Pete Davidson being a Jewish guy. I had this assignment. I was like, what the fuck? There was a book put out by the Nation of Islam. Guys can Google it. It's called The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews. And it has been so discredited by African-American scholars, all kinds of historians, in which it claims that Jews were responsible for most of the slave trade and most of the oppression of Black people. Are there anecdotal instances of Spanish Jews back in the 1400s being involved? Yes, there are. You can find anecdotal evidence of almost anything if you want to pick and choose, cherry pick. So, but Cube there's a famous picture of him. He's holding up the book. I want everybody to read this book. And then, Bill Adler, who I know very well, was the first publicist at Def Jam. He published a pamphlet. It was called Jew on the Brain. And then later there was a book published about it. I mean, the idea that Jewish people are more racist or more responsible for the crimes against Black people is so insane. The indie labels that, getting back to Coolio, Tommy Boy was Tom Silverman, Profile Records, Jive Records. I mean, the indie labels that really were the salvation of hip hop were a lot of Jewish guys who were like, Corey Robbins was Profile. Yeah, I mean, so Coolio's
was Jive.
Yeah, and these are just guys that loved hip hop, and they kept it alive. I mean, there's a reason Jewish people have been in the record business. We could get into that. I mean, the Jews were sort of blackballed from other industries in American life, like, you know, insurance and legal professions had quotas. So at the time that Hollywood was a brand new industry, it was open to Jews and Irish and everybody. So there's a historical reason that were a lot of Jewish moguls in Hollywood and a lot of Jewish record executives. Were some of them exploitative? Sure. Businesses are exploitative in general. Yeah. But I think the remark that Kanye made to Puffy in his, what I read was, you know, go ask those Jews who control you. I was like, who the fuck? Oh, Clive Davis, you know, who discovered, you know, Whitney Houston, all Arista Records. Bad Boy was originally an Arista Records sub-label. But I think most of the people who have had experiences with the record industry have dealt with some Jewish people. And in general, they've been, can anybody say Rick Rubin was bad for hip hop? Yeah. or Leor Cohen, Def Jam? I mean, it was a kind of amalgam of Jewish experiences in the record business and African-American talent. So, I mean, for Kanye to just, if he's consciously doing it, I don't forgive that. If he's just lost his marbles for a while, or he needs to recalibrate his meds, but it is a very hateful thing for an artist to say, the Jews who control the world, I'm about to go off on them. It has its repercussions. And people like me, I mean, I obviously didn't experience the Holocaust, but like my mother and father, they lost their cousins and aunts and uncles. I mean, anybody who didn't come from Europe, any Jew in America can tell you, I'm a generation or two removed from it, but it affected all of us. So we don't, you know, back in the day in Europe, Jews would react to this stuff by appeasement, being quiet, maybe fleeing. But after the Holocaust, it's not just the state of Israel. When there is anti-Semitism, you will find everybody unites. Sarah Silverman, Michael Rappaport, everybody will come out against Kanye West. And it's not because we're a fucking conspiracy. It's just that we know this shit cannot fester. If we allow this to go unanswered, it will lead to deaths. Like, I don't get Kanye's agenda. And I don't think there's a lot of it anymore in hip hop, but there was in the 90s. Professor Griff, I mean, people can go back. Like Public Enemy had to kind of they were on a label co-founded, you know, Def Jam, co-founded by Russell Simmons and Rick Rubin, Leor Cohen. So, I mean, they're not going to allow a guy in a group, Public Enemy, which is a great group, to be saying Jews are responsible for the majority of wickedness in the world. Why should we promote that shit? I mean, it's not like we're all controlling, but we're protective, as any ethnic group should be. Yeah, my daughter, who would describe herself as an African-American Jewish person, as is, you know, Lenny Kravitz or Tracy Ellis Ross, you know, she never heard this. And she goes, how can Black people and Jewish people not get along? Like, we've been through the same shit. It's insane. There's a history to it, like, you know, Blacks and Jews during the height of the civil rights movement in the 60s, early 60s, Dr. Martin Luther King, he had many, many, many rabbis, Jewish lawyers working with. But it transitioned by the time of, you know, by the time it kind of switched from nonviolent, Dr. King's approach, it switched a bit more to Black Power, Stokely Carmichael, you know, the Black Power fist. You started to hear more people saying, you know, and honestly, if you just have to study a bit of like American history. In the big cities of the US, Chicago, New York, Detroit, Cleveland, Italians tended to stay in their neighborhoods and not leave. You saw Do the Right Thing. Like, Italians tended to be like pretty, if Black people come to the neighborhood, we're going to deal with them. Jewish people move a lot. That's just our history. But in many cities, and I have this in my own family, there were Jewish neighborhoods like in Washington, D.C., Chicago, that you've heard of white flight. It's very well known. Black people start moving in. But the businesses, let's say a liquor store or a convenience store, would stay, and it would be Jewish guys who owned it. And then, so the only people that African Americans are dealing with, I'm talking in the 50s and 60s. Oh man, these Jews, their prices are so high. You're hearing the same thing. They talk about Arabs now in the Bronx, all these Arab, guys. Or it might be any Koreans. Ice Cube had some very anti-Korean shit for a while there too, because the stores that stay in the neighborhoods tend not to be African American owned. And for a long time, it was Jewish. And the landlords might be Jewish. So you're like, oh man, the only white person I deal with on a daily basis is this Jew. Or it absolutely has switched where I hear African Americans talking about the Arab guys who own the bodega. Why the fuck they raised the price on that shit? So there's a kind of historical reason for it. And the average person is not going to do his history and say, oh, you know what? Blacks and Jews have so much in common. No, they don't care. So Kanye is feeding into a stream. It's a very dangerous stream of ignorance. And the problem for me is that can lead to very, very disturbed people taking action.
Well, I think some people, especially younger people of the social media generation, don't understand and have trouble making this distinction is that I'm of the belief that, like, artistically speaking, if you want to make a record, like, i.e. like Ice Cube, who did that Black Korea record about the Asians, and then that was a similar thing where it was one instance and that was kind of the catalyst for it, and then he judged an entire race by that and essentially threatened to burn down their stores in the record. So, like, creatively, morally, I think that's absolutely reprehensible. From an artistic standpoint, you have creative freedom. You have freedom of speech. You can choose not to listen to it. You can choose not to buy it. But in this country, you have the right to say it, agree with it or not. Right. You can give me liberty or give me death. So in that respect, okay, you can do that. But I think what people don't understand now is, like, so you have the freedom on the record, you have the freedom in movies to, all the shooting and violence and all of that. But, like, Twitter, like, is that real life or is it not? If you're an actor and you know what I mean? And I just use this as a hypothetical example. This is not a reflection on him personally at all. Again, I don't know him, but, like, if Arnold Schwarzenegger were to tweet something, he was the Terminator in the movie. The first movie, he literally just went around and killed people. But as Arnold Schwarzenegger on Twitter, that at that point, you're a public figure. You're not an entertainer. And I feel like that's something that,
good point. Getting back to Schwarzenegger, people may not know this. Arnold Schwarzenegger was born in Austria. His dad was a member of the SS, a member of the Nazi Party. Came to America. He has spoken very honestly about this. He did this very clearly in a message to Putin. But I mean, people don't know this, but, like, the big bodybuilding federation was started by Joe Weider. And so they, that's Mr. Olympia. Joe Weider is a Jewish guy from Montreal. Arnold quickly saw when he came to America, I don't hate Jewish people. I think his father might have. But it is an absolutely essential aspect of our human condition that whatever bad experiences we have with one ethnicity, we don't generalize. No, we might have multiple. We don't generalize. I hate it. Like, I lived in New York most of my life, but I'm in Canada right now. The most discriminated group in Canada where I'm at are Indigenous people. So I'll hear a guy like, the drunk Indian. Do Indigenous people have a problem with alcoholism? 100%. So the fucking drunk Indian was. I hate that shit. I just hate it. I hate any generalization about any group based on stereotypes, because we're all individuals, especially now. So the fact that everybody is so woke, you can't say anything like gender is not sex. They're different. There's so much awareness of sensitivity that what Kanye said wasn't even like, man, so I was going to bring up what you sent me earlier, Jay-Z's And Jay-Z's not anti-Semitic. I know this. He says Mazel Tov l'chaim, like he tried so hard. And I mean, he knows he's got his own shit now, but I mean, I think his debut record was not on Def Jam, right? Like Reasonable Doubt was on
no, I don't think they did the deal. I think it was just on Priority. It was like
Priority, right? Priority was still okay.
It was the success of Reasonable Doubt that got them their joint, that got Rockefeller their joint deal with Def Jam.
Okay, so now he's negotiating with Leor Cohen and he's dealing with the Jewish guys at Def Jam. He doesn't, but on 444, what was the name of it's more of an interlude.
The story of OJ.
Yeah, story of OJ. And he goes, why? He's saying something positive about Jewish people. He's trying to say, let's take control of our finances, Black America. But he says something, if I get it wrong, I'm sorry. Jewish people, own all the real estate in the United States. I'm like, what? Like, I know some successful Jewish real estate developers, but Trump, like, let's just take the examples. The vast majority of wealth in the United States is not owned by Jewish people. And he probably meant that as a compliment. And this is the thing people don't understand. Sometimes, and I've talked to, I'm Jewish, like I'm actually wearing a Star of David, I'll put it up. But I'll meet girls who'll say, you're not really Jewish, like you don't have those things. I'm like, okay, there's different kind of Jews, right? Like not every Jewish person has a big long beard. And people will say, but how is it offensive to say Jewish people are powerful or you control stuff? I said, because it fits into this hateful stereotype that the Nazis had, that we are the puppet masters of the world. And so I'm not saying Kanye is saying all that, but he touches that nerve when he starts saying, I'm going to go DEFCON. I'm going to go DEFCON 3 on Jews or Jewish people. What do we do to you, man? Like what?
Even if he's just doing it for attention, it doesn't make it any better. But it's like, what's his end game here? Like he's not a record he's trying to promote. There's not, I think it's not a fashion line. I mean, I guess he did wear that White Lives Matter shirt at a fashion show, but it's just like
I don't see an end game. Well, I mean, unless it's like Candace Owens, who I saw, she's so against African-American organizations. And then I saw, when she was in high school, she sued her high school or something, and the NAACP came to her defense. And so is she just a grifter? Is she just she sees a lane here. I'll be the Black conservative who criticizes Black Lives Matter. And I mean, that's a potential revenue stream. I'm going to be the person that speaks out because, let's be honest, society it's a pendulum, right? So there's racism, then it swings over to, or, transphobia, it swings to this wokeness. And somewhere in the middle is where most people are.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be, once it swings over, like defund the police, there's going to be people saying the opposite.
Yeah.
Kanye, I don't see it, man. He's an artist.
Yeah.
And he's a really good, he's a good artist. He's a great producer.
Yeah, my problem with wokeness is that when it gets to a certain point, it prevents honest discussion. And without honest discussion, progress cannot be made.
Yeah, I think woke culture has been a good course correction for the general racism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, misogyny that's existed forever. But now, it might swing back too far. Yeah. And for a guy like Kanye, who has no reason to be saying anything, like, let's take Jews out of the equation. What if he was saying anti-Chinese things? It would be like, what are you getting out of this, man? Like, why? It's not helping you sell records. Unless, he's trying to appeal to white supremacists. Maybe he is. I don't know.
And and again, given his connections to Trump and his associations with him, if he's trying to appeal to Trump's demographic, I guess this, could suit that bullshit narrative. But again, it's like, dude, you're a billionaire. Like,
right.
What's the point? Like,
What I see in him is a bit of there's narcissism and almost megalomania.
Mhm.
And when you start saying I'm Picasso, he might be close to it, but you don't say that about yourself.
That's the other thing that's so interesting. Again, like he has these gospel records. It's just like, isn't the whole idea of Christianity to love everybody? Like, how can?
Yeah. Jesus was about the golden rule: love thy neighbor as yourself.
Like, doesn't that totally
I
contradict?
I cannot account for why some celebrities do the shit they do, but all I can say is, having worked with Ice-T and knowing a bunch of these guys who really have longevity, Queen Latifah, let me go through the rappers: Queen Latifah, LL Cool J, Ice-T, they've had 30, 40, I mean, transitioning from the music to films to TV. You don't hear them saying anti-Semitic shit. That's what makes these people like Ice-T, LL Cool J, Queen Latifah, there's a few others, have long careers because they're not assholes. They really aren't. They're seriously, you cannot be. I mean, I'm going to see what happens with Kanye West in the next couple of years, but you keep alienating, I don't want to say powerful, but influential groups in society, Jewish people. You keep alienating whatever stance he might want to take.
Like
your peers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like other rappers are not actually probably saying, man, they're all rolling their eyes going, Kanye. I mean, I saw the best thing I ever fucking saw about Kanye was Pete Davidson when they were back and forth, and Pete Davidson was on Saturday Night Live going, Kanye, I know you're off your meds. Like, I'm on the meds. It helps. Get back on the meds. Like, we got mental health issues. What did he say? He had a borderline personality. Kanye came out and said he's bipolar. So if he is and he's not being treated for it, dude, just talk to your doctor. It's like, there's no shame in it anymore. I don't really think he hates Jews. And I hope. And I really think he's not trying to foment anger or violence against Jewish people. It could be a byproduct of it. Just like if a white politician were to say, all the crime is being caused by this XYZ group, and suddenly we had a shooting, take responsibility for that. I mean, like you said, he's I don't know if he's a billionaire, literally, but like he's got enough money.
I think he is. Like, I think his deal with the Gap that he had in the last couple of years pushed him over the billion mark.
Wow. Okay, so then just chill, man. Like,
what time is it? Okay, we have some fabulous live music later on, but right now, here's the kind I prefer.